I still remember the exact second I realized my manager was trying to erase me, not fire me, not openly push me out, just rewrite reality until my client forgot I existed. And the worst part was how clean he tried to make it look. Like process, like leadership, like I was just a junior who needed guidance. Then my biggest client sent a 2-line email that should have been routine, but made my stomach drop. Can we schedule one meeting with just you? No leadership on the call. That's when I knew two things at once. They didn't trust him, and if he found out, he'd come for me. I'm a male account manager at a mid-sized B2B company. Think enterprise services, long sales cycles, a lot of meetings, a lot of egos. I'd been working the same account for almost a year. Not casually either. I mean the unglamorous stuff. Mapping stakeholders, chasing procurement, writing the follow-up notes nobody reads until something breaks, smoothing over misunderstandings at 10 p.m. So the relationship didn't die overnight. It was my account in every real-world sense, except on org charts. My manager, let's call him Derek, was newish to our team. He came in with the I-scale people energy. Big talk, polished LinkedIn phrases, constantly using words like leverage and alignment, while never actually doing the work. The kind of guy who interrupts you mid-sentence in meetings to repeat what you just said, but louder, and then glances around like he invented it. At first, I figured he was just annoying. I didn't understand he was dangerous until he started asking questions that weren't about the deal. They were about ownership. Who at the client signs? Who do you talk to most? Which exec likes you? How often are they emailing you directly? Do you think they'd take a call with me if I asked? It was framed as coaching, but he wasn't taking notes like a coach. He was taking notes like someone casing a house. The client, Ridgeway Systems, was the largest opportunity I'd ever handled. If it closed, it would hit my quota for the year and then some. More importantly, it would put my name in rooms I hadn't been in before. The internal joke in sales is that nobody really gets promoted for working hard. They get promoted for being seen. And Derek had a talent for being seen. The first time I felt something shift was after a steering call with Ridgeway's operations director. I'd led the agenda. I'd walked them through the timeline. I'd answered the tough questions. Derek sat in silence for 90% of it, camera on, nodding like a proud dad. After the call, I posted the recap in our internal Slack channel with action items and next steps. Pretty standard. Derek replied in the channel, not to me privately. Great progress today. I'll take it from here and coordinate the next steps with Ridgeway leadership. I read that line 3 times. My chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain at first, because I'll take it from here wasn't a compliment. It was a claim. I messaged him directly. Polite, professional. Hey, just saw your note. Do you want me to keep running point with Ridgeway like we've been doing? He responded with a thumbs up emoji in one sentence. Loop me in on everything. We need tighter control. That was the first red flag. Control. Not support. Not visibility. Not alignment. Control. Over the next 2 weeks, the shift became obvious in tiny, plausible steps. The kind of steps you don't notice until you're already pushed out of the frame. He'd help by sending an email to the client, except he'd send it from his address, and he'd CC me like I was an assistant. He'd ask me to draft an update, then he'd paste my words into his own email and remove my name. He'd jump into meetings I didn't invite him to, then say things like, as my team has been working through. Even when it was just me, I started saving copies of everything without really admitting to myself why. Not screenshots. Those feel petty and paranoid. I just started organizing. Folder names, versions, timestamps, a clean paper trail. Because if you've ever dealt with corporate politics, you learn something fast. Feelings don't matter. Only artifacts do. The client, meanwhile, kept acting like I was still the person they trusted. They'd message me directly with questions. They'd ask me for honest opinions. They'd forward internal concerns they weren't ready to share in a group. And that created a problem for Derek. One afternoon, I was in the middle of building a revised pricing model when I got a calendar invite sent by Derek to a Ridgeway alignment call. No agenda, no notes, just the title. And I checked the guest list. It was Ridgeway's VP of Operations, their procurement lead, and Derek. I wasn't on it. My name wasn't on the invite at all. It wasn't even an accident. If it had been, he would have forwarded it and said, "Jump in." He didn't. I stared at my screen, feeling heat climb up my neck. It's a weird kind of rage when you know someone is taking your work, but doing it with the calm confidence of someone who assumes you won't fight back. I could have confronted him. I could have called him out in Slack. I could have gone over his head immediately. But here's the truth. In corporate life, the first person to look emotional usually loses. So instead, I did something that felt small, but mattered. I emailed Ridgeway's VP directly. "Hi, Mark. Saw there's an alignment call scheduled. Just want to make sure you have everything you need from my side. I've been tracking the open items and can join if helpful." I hit send and waited. 10 minutes later, Mark replied, "Did Derek not include you? We need you on these. You're the one who actually knows what's happening." That sentence landed in my chest like a weight and a relief at the same time, because it confirmed what I suspected. And then Mark added one more line. "Also, can we do one meeting, just you and me? No leadership on the call." I stared at the screen until the words blurred, because I knew what that meant in business terms. They were losing confidence in my manager. They were still willing to trust me, and they were about to make a decision that could either save the deal or blow it up. And in internal terms, it meant something worse. Derek was about to realize the client preferred me. If he found out, he wouldn't just try to steal credit. He'd try to bury me. I didn't reply immediately. I forced myself to breathe, slow and controlled, like I was trying not to make noise in a room where someone dangerous might be sleeping. Then I opened my notes and started writing down every single thing Derek had done. Dates, times, meetings I'd led, emails he'd hijacked, places he'd inserted himself, the tone of his messages, the exact words. Not because I wanted revenge, because I could feel the ground shifting under my feet, and I needed something solid to stand on. I finally replied to Mark with the calmest language I could manage. "Of course, happy to connect, 1-1. When works for you?" And as soon as I sent it, my phone buzzed with a Slack notification. From Derek. "Quick question. Did Ridgeway reach out to you today?" I looked at the message. My cursor hovered over the chat box, and I understood, with a clarity that chilled me, that he was already watching my inbox like it belonged to him. I didn't know it yet, but that single question would cost him everything. I didn't answer Derek right away, not because I was thinking of a clever response, but because I needed to choose the safest one. Anything too slow looked suspicious. Anything too honest was dangerous. In corporate politics, timing is a language of its own. So I replied with something neutral and boring on purpose. "Yeah, just a quick clarification on scope. Nothing major." A lie, but a soft one. The kind people tell every day to survive. He reacted instantly. "Okay, keep me posted." No emoji this time, no warmth, just control tightening. From that moment on, the pressure changed. Before, it felt like Derek was slowly drifting into my lane. Now it felt like he was actively pushing me out of it. Meetings started moving without me. Calendar invites would go out last minute, scheduled accidentally during blocks he knew I couldn't attend. Notes would be shared after decisions were already made. Questions I'd already answered for the client would be re-asked, by him, publicly, as if I hadn't existed. And then there was the language shift. He stopped saying the account. He started saying my client. I told them, "I've been advising my relationship with Ridgeway." Every time he said it in front of leadership, something twisted in my stomach. Not anger, something colder. The realization that if I didn't protect myself, this version of events would become the official one. I went back through the CRM one night, after work. Not casually, methodically. Every logged call, every note, every email summary. I checked timestamps, I checked authorship. I compared it to Derek's activity history. It was lopsided. The account timeline told a very clear story. I'd done the work, he'd appeared near the end. But stories don't matter unless someone is forced to read them. Meanwhile, Ridgway kept reaching out to me, not him. They'd forward emails Derek sent and ask, "Is this accurate?" They'd call me after meetings I wasn't invited to and say, "That wasn't what we discussed, right?" They'd phrase concerns carefully, like they didn't want to get me in trouble, which told me something important. They already felt something was off. They just hadn't named it yet. The 1-1 meeting request sat on my calendar like a loaded weapon. I knew if I told Derek about it, he'd insist on joining for visibility. If I didn't tell him and he found out later, he'd accuse me of going behind his back. There was no version of this where he stayed calm. So I chose a third option. I didn't announce the meeting. I documented it. I replied to the client confirming the call, then logged the interaction in the CRM exactly as policy required. Time, topic, attendees, no opinions, no spin, just facts. If Derek ever went looking, he'd find it, and he wouldn't be able to say, "I hid it." The night before the call, Derek messaged me again. "Tomorrow looks light for you. Let me know if you want to sync beforehand." I read it twice. That wasn't an offer. It was surveillance. I responded, "All good for now." The call with Ridgway's VP was calm, but heavy. The kind of calm where both sides are measuring their words. He didn't accuse Derek directly. He didn't complain. He just asked questions. Who's ultimately responsible for delivery? Who should we escalate concerns to? Who actually understands the constraints here? I answered honestly but carefully. I didn't throw Derek under the bus. I didn't praise him either. I described roles, processes, ownership as it existed in reality, not hierarchy. At one point, Mark paused. "I'll be blunt," he said. "We trust you. We're not sure who else we're supposed to be trusting." That was the moment something in me shifted. I stopped trying to be diplomatic for Derek's sake. I started being precise for my own. "I want this partnership to work," I said, "but it only works if communication stays clean. Right now, there's confusion, and confusion is risk for both of us." He nodded, slowly. When the call ended, I didn't feel victorious. I felt exposed, because now the client had clarity, and clarity has consequences. Within an hour, Derek messaged me. "Just got off a call with Ridgway. They seem distracted. Did they mention anything to you?" He knew, or at least he suspected. That's when the temperature changed completely. Over the next few days, he stopped pretending to collaborate. He corrected me publicly in meetings over minor details. He questioned my judgment in front of leadership. He rewrote status updates to minimize my role. Once, during a team call, he said, "Let's have someone more senior handle this thread going forward," and looked directly at me. I felt something snap, not outwardly, not dramatically. Internally, quiet, final. That night, I stopped being the hero. I stopped trying to save the relationship with my manager. I focused on one thing only, making sure the truth couldn't be erased. I organized everything, emails, CRM logs, meeting notes, client feedback, into a clean chronological record. Not emotional, not defensive, just undeniable. Because I finally understood the real game. Derek wasn't trying to win the client. He was trying to control the narrative before anyone noticed. He didn't deserve it. And now that the client had started asking questions, he was running out of time. He just didn't know how little he had left. I didn't realize it then, but the moment I stopped reacting emotionally was the moment I took my power back. Up until that point, I'd still been operating under an unspoken hope that if I stayed professional enough, Derek would eventually back off. That logic dies the first time you see someone benefit from stepping on you. Once they taste it, they don't stop. They optimize. So I stopped trying to anticipate his moods and started anticipating his moves. The first thing I did was change how I worked. Not what I did, but how visible it was. Every update went into the CRM within minutes of happening. Every client call got a follow-up email with a neutral summary and clear ownership. Not, "we discussed," but "I reviewed," "I confirmed," "I advised." Always factual, always time-stamped, not to show off, to anchor reality. Then I paid attention to Derek's behavior with a different lens. I wasn't offended anymore. I was curious. He never challenged my facts, only my framing. He never corrected me privately, only publicly. He never took responsibility for decisions, only credit for outcomes. That pattern told me everything I needed to know. One afternoon, leadership asked for a high-level forecast update on Ridgeway. Derek volunteered to present. I watched him pull numbers I'd built, assumptions I'd documented, risks I'd flagged, and remove every trace of where they came from. I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct him mid-meeting. I took notes. Afterward, I sent a recap email to leadership, thanking Derek for the presentation and attaching supporting documentation in case anyone wanted deeper context. The documents were mine, authored by me, dated months earlier. No accusation, no commentary, just quiet alignment between words and proof. That's when I noticed something subtle but important. Leadership stopped asking Derek follow-up questions. They started asking me. The shift was small at first. A Slack DM here, a calendar invite there, but the tone was different, less performative, more practical. Meanwhile, Derek grew sharper. He began framing my actions as overstepping. He started mentioning chain of command. He used phrases like, "not your call," even when it very much was. And then came the email. It was sent late, after hours, to me and HR. Short, polished, dangerous. He claimed I was operating outside defined responsibilities and creating confusion with the client. He suggested we realign roles for the health of the account. I read it twice, calmly, because this wasn't a warning. It was a setup. If I reacted emotionally, I'd look defensive. If I stayed silent, he'd define the story. So I did the only thing left that still gave me leverage. I replied with documentation. Not everything, just enough. I acknowledged the concern. I agreed clarity mattered. And then I attached a simple timeline. Meetings led, decisions made, communications sent. Each linked to CRM entries and client emails. No adjectives, no blame, just receipts. HR replied the next morning asking to understand context. Leadership asked to sync briefly. Derek went quiet. For 2 days. That silence wasn't relief. It was calculation. On the third day, Ridgeway's VP requested another call, this time with procurement and legal on their side. The subject line was blunt. Next steps and ownership. Derek saw the invite before I did. I know because he messaged me seconds later. "You on this?" I replied. "Yes." Nothing else. The call was tense but professional. Ridgeway laid out their concerns clearly. Mixed messaging, inconsistent answers, unclear accountability. They didn't name Derek. They didn't need to. They asked one question that mattered. Who is ultimately responsible for this partnership day to day? Leadership hesitated, and that hesitation did more damage than any accusation could have. I didn't jump in. I waited. Let the silence work. Finally, the director said, "Operationally, that's been handled by him," and nodded toward my square on the screen. Derek's face didn't change, but his jaw tightened. That was the micro shift, the moment where everyone in the room silently updated their understanding of who mattered. After the call, HR scheduled a formal review, not of me, of the account. Derek tried to spin it as collaboration. He offered to mentor me. He suggested shared ownership. He talked about learning moments. But it was too late. Once a narrative cracks, it doesn't heal. It fractures. I realized something then that felt both heavy and freeing. I wasn't fighting Derek anymore. I was outgrowing him, and he knew it. The last message he sent me before the review was short. "Let's keep this professional." I stared at it for a long time before replying. "Always have." And for the first time since this started, I meant it, not as a shield, but as a fact, and then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. The week of the review didn't explode the way I expected. No shouting, no dramatic emails, no last-minute power plays. Just a sudden, unnatural quiet around Derek. He stopped inserting himself into threads. He stopped correcting me in meetings. He even started declining calls he used to dominate. That's when I knew things had moved past control and into damage containment. The review itself wasn't framed as an investigation. It was positioned as risk assessment. That mattered. When companies stop talking about people and start talking about risk, outcomes change fast. Leadership wanted to understand one thing: why a near seven-figure client had started bypassing a manager. I was asked to walk through the account history, not defensively, chronologically. So I did. I showed how the relationship started, how trust was built, where decisions were made. I explained why certain compromises were agreed to and why others weren't. I referenced documents, not feelings, emails, not opinions, timelines, not interpretations. Every time Derek spoke, he spoke in abstractions, strategy, vision, executive alignment. Every time I spoke in specifics, dates, names, deliverables. The contrast wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. At one point, a finance lead asked Derek a simple question about pricing concessions Ridgway had requested 3 months earlier. He answered confidently and incorrectly. I didn't interrupt. I opened the email chain. I read the relevant line. I stopped. No commentary. That was all it took. From that moment on, the room stopped evaluating performance and started assessing exposure. Ridgway didn't threaten to leave. They didn't have to. They said one sentence that carried more weight than any ultimatum. We need clarity on who we're working with going forward. HR followed up the next day. Derek was removed from day-to-day involvement pending realignment. His access to the account was restricted temporarily. His calendar suddenly opened up in ways it never had before. People started coming to me directly, not to gossip. Professionals don't do that openly, but to confirm things they already suspected. Hey, just checking. You've been the primary contact on Ridgway this whole time, right? Can you resend the original scope doc? Do you mind owning the next exec update? I didn't celebrate. I didn't react at all, because chaos doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like gravity reasserting itself. Derek tried once more to regain footing. He scheduled a meeting with me, HR, and our director under the banner of resetting collaboration. He talked about miscommunication, about pressure, about how he might have overstepped without realizing. He never apologized. He just reframed. When it was my turn, I said exactly one thing. I'm comfortable being accountable for the work I've been doing. That's all I've ever asked for. Nothing more. 2 weeks later, compensation letters went out. Mine included an expanded role and formal ownership of the account. His did not include a bonus. The reason given was neutral. Performance misalignment. The effect was not. People like Derek don't implode publicly. They erode. Influence dries up. Access narrows. Invitations stop coming. They don't fall. They fade. The last time I saw him, he nodded at me in the hallway, like we'd simply passed through weather together. And in a way, we had. The storm was over, and the ground had settled exactly where it always should have been. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. The strangest part came after everything was resolved. No announcements, no victory lap, just a quiet shift in how the world treated me. Ridgway stopped CCing anyone else by default. When they needed answers, they came straight to me. When procurement stalled, they asked what I recommended. When legal pushed back, they wanted my read on risk. The relationship felt lighter, cleaner, like a room after someone finally opened a window. Internally, my role changed in small but permanent ways. Leadership didn't hover. They didn't reassign oversight. They trusted the flow because there was nothing left to manage around. The account simply worked. A month later, the contract closed. Not dramatically. not with applause, just a signed agreement, processed cleanly, exactly as forecasted. The kind of close that tells you the real work happened long before the paperwork. I remember sitting at my desk after the confirmation came in, staring at the screen longer than necessary, not out of disbelief, out of recognition. This wasn't luck. It wasn't timing. It was the delayed consequence of choosing not to disappear when it would have been easier. Derek left the company quietly a few weeks after that. No farewell message, no goodbye tour, just his name removed from the directory one morning. Someone said he'd found a better fit. Maybe he did. I didn't feel satisfaction in his exit. What I felt was something steadier, closure. Because the truth is, I didn't want him punished. I wanted my work to exist in the open, unedited. I wanted the client protected. I wanted to stop bracing for impact every time I opened my inbox. And that's exactly what happened. There were no lingering questions, no awkward handoffs, no unresolved tension. The narrative aligned with reality, and once that happens, everything else sorts itself out. A few months later, Mark from Ridgeway told me something during a routine check-in. Casual. Offhand. "We almost walked," he said. "Not because of the product, because of the noise. Once that cleared, it was an easy decision." That sentence stayed with me, because it confirmed what I had learned the hard way. Most corporate damage doesn't come from incompetence. It comes from people trying to control stories instead of outcomes. I didn't win by exposing anyone. I won by refusing to let my work be rewritten, by staying factual when it would have felt better to be furious, by staying visible when it would have felt safer to stay quiet, by understanding that professionalism isn't passivity, it's precision. The version of me that started this story would have tried to smooth things over, would have doubted himself, would have hoped fairness would emerge on its own. That version doesn't work here anymore. Now, when someone asks who owns an account, there's no confusion. There's a name, there's a record, there's trust that's been earned slowly and defended carefully. And every once in a while, when a junior colleague asks how to deal with a manager who keeps taking credit, I tell them the truth. Don't fight the person. Don't chase approval. Protect the work. Anchor reality. Let consequences do the rest. Because eventually they always do. And when they do, there's nothing left to explain.